This is the most comprehensive study of mainstream consumer adoption and use of electric vehicles and gives us a roadmap to the future. CVEI stands for Consumers, Vehicles and Energy Integration. It was a cross-industry consortium project led by TRL, which brought together a range of expertise. Its aims were to address the challenges and opportunities associated with transitioning to low-carbon vehicles and how to integrate those vehicles with the electricity supply system. A key unique part of the CVEI project is that we conducted the world's first and largest mainstream consumer trials of both battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. What we mean by mainstream consumers is those consumers who have not yet adopted an EV and are not planning to adopt one in the near future. And so they represent the future market, and it's really important to understand their needs and attitudes and behaviours. So as part of this, TRL managed a fleet of 123 BEVs and PHEVs, and we captured data from over 580,000 miles of journeys and 15,000 charge events. And put together, this gives us the most comprehensive data set on mainstream consumer attitudes and behaviours that we have to date. We conducted two separate trials with mainstream consumers. The first was a consumer uptake trial in which we explored the barriers and motivators affecting mainstream consumer adoption of BEVs and PHEVs. The second was a set of consumer charging trials. Here we looked to understand how mainstream consumers will use and charge their vehicles in future and how they will respond to a set of managed charging solutions, one in which they're incentivised to charge at off-peak times and another in which they're incentivised to give control of their charging to an energy supplier or another third party. The consumer uptake trial generated a number of important insights. If we take a few, for example. Firstly, about a quarter of mainstream consumers said they would be likely to choose a fully electric, battery electric vehicle in the next 5 years. This is quite promising for uptake, as EV market share is around the 2 to 3% mark. For the majority of mainstream consumers, however, they reported that a BEV would not be suitable for their main household vehicle needs, and instead they would be more likely to choose one as a second vehicle. Equally, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles were more likely to be adopted in the next 5 years. So this suggests that PHEVs will have a bigger role to play in that near term. Secondly, we found that range remains a critical factor for adoption. For the majority of mainstream consumers to adopt a BEV as a main car, ranges of 200 miles are needed. To reach 90% of the market, you need ranges of around 300 miles. And equally, we found that electric range is just as important with plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. To get to around 90% of mainstream consumers, around 100-mile range is needed. The consumer charging trials generated the most comprehensive data set on mainstream consumer charging behaviours that we have to date. From this data set, we observed that mainstream consumers are most likely to do most of their EV charging at home and during existing peak times between about 4 and 7 p.m. What this means is that without any intervention, the increase in EV adoption is likely to accentuate existing electricity peaks. The good news, however, is that the two managed charging solutions that we tested in the trial were found to be very effective at shifting that demand away from peak times. So in the case of our system, which is similar to a time of use tariff, we found that the majority of charging was shifted to later in the evening period. And in the case where consumers were incentivised to give control of their charging to the energy supplier, the charging was shifted into the overnight period. So what this tells us is that both systems were effective at shifting behaviour. Importantly as well, consumers were very positive about both of these systems, and when asked whether they would choose a type of managed charging in future or an unmanaged system where they were free to manage it themselves, the majority would choose a managed charging system. This gives us confidence that consumers can be flexible in how they charge their EVs and that they are willing to engage with these systems in future.